welcome back to my channel. Today I just wanted to take a little look back at my reading for August. I finished 11 books last month, and even though it's a little late in September, I thought I would take a little time to just share with you some of the books that I read last month. I read some really wonderful things, some fiction, some non-fiction, some really excellent writing. The first book that I finished in August was Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. This is a Caribbean book, and the author is from Trinidad and Tobago. The book is set there. And we're following the life of a young mother and her child as the child grows up and becomes an adult in his own right and moves to the United States and goes through the immigrant life. But most of the book is focused on life in Trinidad. And so we have this really vivid description of life in Trinidad. We get really great descriptions of food and festival and just the day-to-day life of neighbors and friends and going to work and dealing with trauma and tragedy and finding a way to just carry on. And I loved a lot of things about this book. I loved how the author described the life in the Caribbean and also how she described the life of the immigrant. And, you know, even though a person has gone through all these hardships, how people are still trying to take advantage of someone who is disenfranchised and can't necessarily appeal to the legal system for justice. But like I said, most of the book is set in Trinidad and Tobago, and we get a lot of discussion about relationships and domestic violence in heterosexual and homosexual relationships and just violence in general. There was some abuse at the beginning of the book where a child is being abused, and that was really difficult to read, but thankfully that is not a theme that was continued throughout the book, although we did see some evidence of maybe lingering effects of what that abuse does to a child. Like I said, this book was really, really good. I enjoyed reading it. I love reading Caribbean literature, as you know. And this one was a really good example and one that I wouldn't hesitate to recommend to you. Ingrid Persaud's book was published by Penguin Random House here in the United States, and I got an electronic download from the publisher. The book that I got was also from a publisher, but this time it's a print copy of Luster by Leilani. And this one was published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. I got this copy from the publisher, and Leilani is a young African-American woman, and she's a very intelligent person, and her intelligence comes through in her prose. It's just that the subject of this book might be a little bit off-putting. Anyway, her intelligence, I tell you, her smarts, the way she talks about science and religion and politics and pop culture, and it infuses her descriptions of life. But like I said, the main character is a little difficult, and the fact that we're reading about a young woman taking control of her sexuality and using her sexual escapades as a way to vent her frustration in life might be a little bit difficult to read. The fact that there's also an open marriage being discussed in this book, but I don't think that you have to necessarily relate to a character in order to enjoy the writing. And so this felt a little eye-opening. It felt like I was privy to seeing how other people live. I thought that the writing was just so brilliant, so engaging, that even though I didn't necessarily want to be these characters, I was really interested to read about them. So this one got very high ratings from me. I think I gave it like a 4.5-star rating because I thought that it was brilliant. I thought it was really brilliantly executed. The way the author talked about life and made these descriptions of relationships was just fantastic. So I'm going to recommend this one to you. If you haven't heard about Luster by Leilani, go look her up. Look up other reviews. Didi from Brown Girl Reading did a review on her channel a few days ago, and I recommend that you check out her review as well. Also read an electronic copy of Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson, who is known for her narrative nonfiction, The Warmth of Other Suns. She's also a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and her book Caste is just brilliant. I read an electronic copy from the publisher's Penguin Random House again, but I now have my own physical copy, which I just forgot to bring to this video. Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent portrays American racial hierarchy through the lens of a caste system. So what the caste system looks like in India, how a person is born into a caste and nothing that they can do allows them to escape. No matter how much you work, you can't outwork your social status. And just the fact that you were born in this caste determines how the rest of your life will go, no matter what you attempt to do. And I thought that likening that to racial status in the United States was a really apt comparison. And just the way Wilkerson goes through the descriptions and shows the manifestation of the caste in the United States, it was heartbreaking, but it was also, like I said, brilliantly done. So this is a book that I'm planning to reread. I read a copy to review for the publishers, but I'm going to be rereading this with my buddy reading group in a couple of months, I think, or next month. So I'm looking forward to rereading this, and I think that this is a book that everyone should read, especially people who don't quite get why Black Lives Matter is so important. The people who say all lives matter as a response to Black Lives Matter, they need to read Caste, because it's not that Black Lives Matter means that all lives don't matter. It's that because all lives matter, Black lives matter too. So, yeah. Read Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, The Origins of Our Discontent. What I find interesting is how this book has been marketed in other countries. In the United States, the subtitle is The Origins of Our Discontent. A friend of mine who's in the Netherlands shared a picture of this, and so I'll share both pictures here, that this book has a different subtitle in different countries. I don't think it would ever have gotten published in the United States with this subtitle over here. So, I find that interesting. So the next book that I read was this one. Again, from the publishers. I read a lot of books from publishers in August. The next one that I read, however, was The Doctor of Aleppo, a novel by Dan Mayland, and this is published by Blackstone Publishing. I got a copy from TLC Book Tours. I review books for them sometimes, and this one was also wonderful. I gave it a 4-star rating, although on reflection, I think I might increase that to 4.5. This was really fantastic, in that it is set during the Syrian Revolution in the early 2010s. So the book happens over a few years, and we're able to trace how a couple of characters' lives progress for about 4 years or so. We meet a young Syrian-American woman who identifies herself through her dual citizenship. Even though she was raised in the United States, her father was from Syria, and so she goes to Syria to work. She's working with a European man, a Swede, working to develop parks at a time when a revolution is happening. And they get caught up in violence, and so they meet the doctor. You trying to eat Mommy's book? You can't knock through this one. They meet up on the doctor. The title is Doctor of Aleppo, and we get to go into this doctor's life and see how he has been working to resist the backlash from the government at the revolt. Because he's a doctor and he's working in the country when a lot of people who are professionals have already fled, he's forced to treat both the rebels and the soldiers who are fighting against them. His family is also pretty political. His wife and his sister-in-law are part of the resistance, part of the revolution, and so they're trying to get him involved by trying to help administer medical care to people who've been hurt in protest, even though that is illegal. And so we see some of the quandaries, some of the complications of just living in this time and trying to just, do your part. How you discover what your part is. There's a lot discussed in this book. There are lots of characters that really flesh out this story, and so we get to meet a man who's a soldier and see how he loses members of his family because of his passions, and we also see how people who are part of the resistance also lose members of their family because of their passions. So I thought that this was a really interesting look at the complications of war and how sometimes it doesn't matter which side you're on, it really doesn't matter because there's violence on both sides, there's loss on both sides. Really great example of just how sometimes there's a paradox in life, and no matter where you are, where you stand, it's hard to escape. So that was the Doctor of Aleppo. After all of that, I kind of needed some hopeful things. So I read A Dream Too Big by Caylin Lewis Moore, and this is a memoir. I also got this one from the publishers. This is from Thomas Nelson Books. Caylin Lewis Moore was a black man growing up in California from Compton, and he grew up in a place where his environment is rife with gangs and hopelessness, and to see and to read how this young man had a vision for how he wanted his life to go and how he stuck with that vision and pursued it. He pursued an athletic career until he realized that he could also pursue an academic career, and how he transitioned from being a young kid on the football field to being a Rhodes Scholar going to Oxford to study and never losing his faith in himself or in God. And I just love this book. I read it in August, and in the beginning, the first couple of days of September, I found myself gravitating back towards pages of this book and rereading parts of it. I shared some of it on my Instagram as well. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see me having talked about this book. So finished this one and loved it, and that was a 5-star rating for me. And then a couple more books. Loving Well in a Broken World. Oh, my time is running out. Loving Well in a Broken World, another book from the publishers. And this one is about just what it says, loving well in a broken world, how we need to find empathy for other people in order to really show love and to we need to cultivate empathy. We need to cultivate empathy even when the world is broken. It's getting a little warm. Okay, I'm going to take off your shirt. And then The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth is set in Australia, and we're reading about a pair of twins who are very different. One of them has an emotional or mental disability, and the other has been her advocate her entire life. And then we have to see how they respond to an issue that happened in their past, as well as how they deal with changes in their relationships and their relationship statuses as they are now adults. A fantastic look at sisterhood and the complexities of relationships with your family members. We'll talk more about that pretty soon. So we took a break, but we're back to talk about the last few books of my August reading. I think I was about to tell you about The Same Earth by Kai Miller, which is a book about Jamaica. Kai Miller is a Jamaican author living now in England, but he writes as someone who is a son of the soil, who misses the life there, would write. So this story is about a young woman who her family wants her to move away from the sameness of their community in Jamaica, and so they send her to England. And this is in the mid-1900s, and they send her there so she can have experiences, even though she doesn't quite know that that's why they're sending her away. And it's about the collective awareness that she gains from people who have been there and give her warnings, and how that mirrors or is different from her experiences when she does go to England herself. And of course, when she returns to Jamaica and she's comparing the experiences there with what she misses of the life. I feel like I'm rambling. This is a book about Jamaica being experienced by someone who's lived other places. It's also the exploration of a lot of different backstories and how they all come together to form a story. It's wonderful. Kai Miller is one of my favorite authors now. So far, I've read 2 of his books and love them. I have another of his books on my TBR soon. I also read The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje, and I read this for a book club. But I'm going to be doing a full review of this one on my channel for my Booker Prize winning series. So I'll talk a little bit more in depth about it in that standalone video. But for now, I'll just tell you that it's about a nurse who has been caring for soldiers during World War II, and now that the war has ended, she's suffering from some kind of trauma, some PTSD, and so after the war has ended and other people have returned to their lives, she's still kind of holed up in this building, caring for a man who she doesn't know, and no one really seems to know because he's so badly injured that a lot of his identity has been erased. And people call him the English patient, but even though they don't really know his origins, the fact that they are calling him that, even when the evidence suggests that he is not English after all, reflects some of the transference, what they want this person to embody, how much of themselves they're actually giving to this person's identity. So it's a really great book. I think the author really did a good job of exploring art and history and relationships and survival and loss and how people cope with those things. Great book, and I'm going to be talking about it in its own video, so I won't talk too much more about it here. But just know that I read The English Patient by Ondaatje, is one of my August reads. I also read Windward Heights by Maryse, Conde, another Caribbean author. This one was originally written in French and translated by the author's husband. His name is Philcox. Richard Philcox is her translator. Maryse Conde is from Guadeloupe, and so this book is a retelling of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, but set in the Caribbean around the turn of, around the emancipation of enslavement. And so it takes the themes of Wuthering Heights and reframes a lot of the issues that were problems for Heathcliff. Frames it in terms of black and white and mixed race people and colorism, how important colorism was around that time. Those themes are enduring because we're still having a lot of those same conversations now. So although this is a book about history, it's also reflective of what's current. So there's a lot about this book that's really interesting, the way the author takes the story of Wuthering Heights and shows it to us in a Caribbean setting, but also how she talks about life and the different experiences that people have and how they frame their thoughts about themselves and about each other. In this book, as well as in her book that I read a few months ago, In the Mangroves, in both of those books, I'm seeing similarities in that there is a scene where someone has died and the people that they knew have gathered to talk about them or think about them. And so we're learning about the individuals who are gathered. We're also learning a little bit about the person who has died, but through the lens of people who saw them. So I feel like I'm seeing trends in Maryse Conde's writing. It's something that I want to explore as I read more of her books, but I really enjoyed it. I was reading it along with two other people, and they DNF'd somewhere around page 150, and this is a pretty big book. It's about close to 400 pages. It's not a fast-paced book, but it is interesting in how it talks about xenophobia is really the issue in this book, because it's no longer just black and white and mixed. It's also how people feel about people who have their same ethnicity but are from different countries in the Caribbean. And that's interesting to me, just because a lot of people see Caribbean people as one, and within this book you find that people from one country see themselves sometimes very different from people from another Caribbean country. This is a really interesting book. I'd love to get more eyes on it. I'd love to get more eyes on Maryse Conde as a writer. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in an upcoming video. I'm thinking about some series where I can highlight Caribbean books. Hey, we almost finished. And then Dapper Dan, a memoir by Daniel R. Day. His book is subtitled Made in Harlem, and I thought it was a really great title for his book because Daniel R. Day, as a son of Harlem, his parents moved from the South to New York during the period of the Great Migration in the 1900s, the Great Migration of African Americans seeking refuge from the Jim Crow laws in the South and coming to New York or other northern states and finding a lot of the same prejudices, finding a lot of the same disenfranchisement, just in different ways. And in his memoir, Daniel R. Day talks about how his parents tried to live the dreams that they had. You know, they brought these dreams from the South with not much else but hope for themselves, and if not for themselves, for their children. And what it was like for the children to grow up kind of saddled with their parents' hopes and dreams and expectations, but also feeling lost, feeling unmoored in a place that didn't really expect more from you other than hustling and illegal activity. And so Day talks about his own experience with gambling and fraud and lawlessness before he finds his path and finds his purpose in the fashion industry, and how he really pioneered this industry for himself. So the book is a lot about his own transformation, but it's also transformation of lots of other things. So it reads like a who's who of the hip-hop world in the 1980s and 90s, because a lot of those up-and-coming stars, people that we know now and knew then, but just how they interacted with him. Fascinating vignettes about life then, but also how Day's story reflects on Harlem as a community of black people, the transformation that Harlem has gone through, the effect that drugs had on the people, how that trickled down to the community and the industry. And this book is so well written. It is very conversational. It is very hopeful, because to see that someone who almost, there were so many points where you would have probably said that he wouldn't have made it, and then to know that Daniel R. Day and people like him survived and thrived, and didn't just thrive as hustlers. Why do you look like you want to nap again? You just woke up. Yeah, to know that people like him, they didn't just survive, they thrived, and decades later they're still around to share their wisdom with other people. Some of the things that I loved about Daniel R. Day's story is that he's very literary, and he talks about how he learned from books and how he seeks to teach others through books. Fascinating, fantastic story. I gave it a full 5-star rating, and I think that's all that I wanted to talk about. Is that all? Was that all? Did Mommy have another book to talk about? I think that's it for now. We'll be back next time for another video. Thank you so much for watching this one, and I'd love to chat with you in the comments. Let me know what was the best book that you read in August. I don't know how to choose. So many books that I read in August made such an impact on me, so I'm going to be recommending all of them, but I'd love to hear about your thoughts. So leave us a comment down below, give us a thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more. Subscribe if you want to see more. Until next time, happy reading. Bye.